The more teachers know about the reading practices of the class, the more effective their teaching can be. I'm joined by Teresa Kremen from the Open University and Sonia Thompson, Deputy Head, St Matthew's C of E Primary School in Birmingham, to discuss this. Now, a key finding from the Teachers as Readers research was that teachers need a considerable knowledge of children as readers, but surely they know their children well, especially at primary school.
Well, in many respects, teachers do know their children well and want to, but there is a real challenge with the pressure of the curriculum, with the pressure of time on teachers to get to know the children as individuals, to get to know their life patterns, practices, homes, families, and certainly to get to know their reading practices. Teachers tend to know more about the children's targets, their reading ages, than they necessarily do about that child's favourite author or that child's digital practices at home, for example. And we found that when teachers widened their understanding of individual, the whole class, but individually those children's practices and preferences as readers, they began to take a wider frame to reading and were more able to more effectively take them forward as readers, extend them.
So by practices, you mean more than just the level of books that they're on at the time or their skills and abilities. What sorts of indicators might you look out for in the classroom then, Sonia?
Certainly for us, we do a reading survey with our children and we ask them all types of questions around what are their favourite books and genres, who are their favourite authors, who is the person that they read with at home the most, who do they read to, do they see themselves as a reader, and if they do, why do they? So it's those types of questions where you're trying to draw out from the children what are the distinctive areas in terms of that child being a reading child, and so that you can see that there's I think what we found is that there is a wider picture than just a child picking up a book. There's some wider things that children are doing in terms of reading practices that you wouldn't necessarily uncover in terms of your normal teaching day, teaching week.
One of the things that the teachers did was 24-hour reads, where as teachers they scribbled down and collected and made a kind of massive collage of everything I've read in the last 24 hours. They took that into the classroom and then said, what do you read in the next 24 hours, and invited the children to also do the same, document everything you read, might include what mum and dad were reading, sibling reading, and some took photographs, others just, grabbed little extracts of things they were reading at home, a cutout of an email, a piece off the side of a cornflake packet, whatever it was, to demonstrate both to themselves but also to their teachers that reading in the 21st century isn't book bound. Much of it is online, and recognising that diversity. So the book bag with the school book in it was only one tiny part of the world of reading at home. And I think that was quite sobering for folk, wasn't it? To realise, our contribution to home reading life is actually quite small. Yeah? And the real world of reading at home is massive.
Massive, yes. Massive, and as you said, really diverse. Children are contacting other family members in different parts of the country, reading letters and Skyping and reading, as you said, packets and buying different games and reading the instructions for games. And all these wouldn't necessarily be acknowledged as reading, but for many children, that is the bulk of their reading time. And I think it is this idea of that little book in that packet that we send home is just a small part of a child's reading life.
So how did it help you understand both their practices and preferences in terms of enabling them to read for pleasure more effectively?
Again, certainly for us, I think what it homed us in and tuned us into was the things that they're doing already. So again, we can facilitate more of that, but also the things that they didn't have access to reading at home, things like newspapers, magazines, comics. We were able to buy those into our schools, put them into our different spaces, and therefore enabling the children. A lot of our children were not reading necessarily non-fiction, loved animals, told us that they loved animals, but didn't have anything to read that sort of was about animals. So we brought National Geographic, and again we have such a big take up on that. What we try to do as well is when the children are finished with them and they're getting a little bit tatty in school, we send them home. It's such a pleasure for the children to take them home, and we would never have known half of these things if you don't have that opportunity just to tune in to what their preferences are.
Yeah. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of the sources that young children are reading. What then counts, Teresa? Who defines then what good reading is, and how is that all measured?
Well, in the school system, what counts as reading is what is assessed as reading, and that's extremely limited and narrow. And what, certainly in England currently, and partly inevitably because it's got to be measured, and it's quite difficult to measure a reader's sense of identity, a sense of self as a reader, a sense of desire to read. It's difficult to measure reading for pleasure in that sense. But what we were wanting to do, and what the teachers did, was to redefine what counts as reading in my classroom. I recognise you as a reader if you're committed to exploring your interest in animals on the net, or indeed through the National Geographic. I recognise you and define you as a reader. I might try to tempt you to some Dick King-Smith books because he writes about animals.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that the journey is to books. It's about diversity and recognising that as adult readers we all read a wide range. I think it's really important not to suggest we're heading towards one kind of final goal that is a national curriculum, but a recognition of diversity in text and context and as individual readers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Teresa, Sonia, thank you very much.